gonna save you the time of all the measuring. Just pause the screen and copy this down. The shaded in areas are the areas where I'm gonna be pouring the concrete in, and around those I'm gonna need to make some holes so I can install the walls that will hold that concrete. I'm gonna drill some holes and we're gonna be screwing them in from the underside. So use a regular screw gun to make this hole a little bit larger on the back side so that when we screw it in, it's all flush with the board. So I bought these little 1-inch bingo chips on Amazon, and I'm gonna use them to texture the sides of the walls to make them look like precast panels. Here I've got these thin little pieces of plastic, which you get when you rip them off the side of a bucket to open the lid. You could honestly use anything to separate it. I want it to look like a precast panel, and I want it to look like there's a separation, and this is made out of 2 separate pieces instead of just 1. So I cut them down to size, and I'm gonna glue them onto the line in the center that I made. So I'm using pretty old, scuffed up pieces of melamine, and it's gonna go well with the vibe and the aesthetic of this planter box, but there's a hole right here, and I'm just gonna patch that up with a little bit of molding clay and a razor. I'm gonna blow all the dirt and all the debris out of the mold. We're almost done. Now I'm gonna put super glue around these inside edges and place that box I just made inside very carefully, because we only got one shot. So the date to cast it finally came, and I can't say that I'm not nervous. I want this to look perfectly imperfect, just the right amount of buggles here and there, not too much, not too little, and I'm gonna show you how to do that. Now we're stuck with the question of which material we're gonna use, and I honestly don't think that regular concrete's the best alternative. With regular concrete, you're definitely gonna have to put some wires or rebar or something in there to make sure that that thing doesn't break and fall apart as soon as you go to demold it. The form's already too complicated. I don't want to complicate this any further, so I'm going to be using something called DFRC precast. I'm going to link that product down below in the description. All the mixes in the precast line have a bunch of fibers in them and a bunch more additives because they're designed for super thin but super strong concrete countertops. It also comes with an excess precast modifier, which you're going to be using instead of water. This stuff has a lot of strength adding additives inside it too. I'm using the gray one. It comes with the option of getting a white one also, which is good either as just using it as plain white, or also adding in like pigments if you want it to be like a light pink shade or some other type of light shade of color. The gray concrete isn't the best solution for that. For that, you're gonna need to buy the white one. But if you're going with darker colors, I'd suggest the gray one, like a jet black. You definitely want to go with the gray one. That was an alternative that I was thinking of, but I think I would just stick with the regular concrete gray. The best way to mix any concrete mix is to pour the water into the bucket first and then slowly start adding the concrete into the water. So that's exactly what I'm gonna do. And you always have to be sure to shake up this modifier pretty good before using it. So I'll spill out a little bit just so it's easier for me to shake it up, and then spill out the rest. And you technically can mix this by hand, but I'm gonna be using this because it's a lot easier, it's a lot faster for me. Also, be sure that your bucket is a little bit stronger than something that like you'd buy in Home Depot, because those tend to break very easily and you don't want that. That's gonna be a big mess for you to be cleaning up. We sell heavy duty industrial buckets on the website also. I'll link that and everything else below. Also, if you're gonna be adding a pigment, this is when you'd add it into the water so that it gets dispersed everywhere and you don't have any dark spots or concentrated pigmented spots anywhere in your concrete. You're gonna have a good spread. And always be sure to hit the sides of the bucket with a trowel, because otherwise a lot of times there's going to be dry material that hasn't been properly mixed up stuck to the sides, and you don't want that. And if you're new to working with concrete, be sure to be wearing gloves. If you don't, you could get something called concrete burns. If I showed you on the channel right now, the video would probably be demonetized. So now I'm gonna lay a sheet of plastic over it, which has the drawing of the full planter box from top view. And this is gonna help me see where I have to put the holes so that there's water flowage and it's not just a box. I'm gonna use this little tool to draw everything out on the concrete and then cut up some candles and use those pieces of candle stubs as the holes, which will let the water pass through. So that didn't exactly work. I'm gonna see if I could just puncture a hole through where I want these things to be so I can see when I take the sheet of plastic off. And now it's time to pour the concrete in, and I'm not gonna be vibrating at all. I'm just pouring it in. I want there to be those kind of bug holes from lack of vibration. I kind of forgot to show you, but normally you'd use a paste wax to make sure that there's a good release from those walls, but the spacings over here are way too thin for that, so instead I'm going to be using G1, which is a liquid release agent. So you spray it on just like this, make sure it gets full coverage. And now I'm worried that if I start placing concrete on the top of the form, it's gonna start squeezing the rest of the concrete out of these holes, so I have to seal this up. It's really funny, I filled the whole thing up to the top with exactly 3 bags, and I can't say I was planning on it, to be honest. It just so happened that exactly 3 bags was enough to fill this mold. So now we're gonna leave this for tomorrow morning and then demold. So now it's the next morning, it's time to demold, and I gotta be honest, I don't think that it's gonna be too easy. But before we do that, I have to tell you why you have to demold the next morning. This premix mixture has a lot of additives, one of which is an integral sealer. And if you don't demold it the next day, the areas that are exposed to air are gonna end up being a lot lighter in color than the ones that are nice and sealed up by the wall. The integral sealer makes it more or less permanent, and that's why you gotta demold as soon as you can. You could just scrape off the extra bits, and usually you're gonna have these glass fibers sticking out afterwards, so you could use a blowtorch or just a regular big torch to burn them off. So I'm afraid that this long piece is extremely brittle, and I wanna get that bottom on there as fast as I possibly can. So I'm gonna demold this, and it's 1/4 of an inch thick. Just because it's made out of the excess precast material doesn't mean that I shouldn't be extremely careful with it. I'm gonna use this construction adhesive to adhere this to the floor piece that I made. I'm gonna be sanding these edges so that they're more or less flush. And since it's the first day, you don't need to use any type of diamond grinder or anything. I'm gonna be using a regular orbital sander with 60 grit paper. You probably won't be able to do this the second day or the third day because concrete gets stronger and stronger the more time you give it. And be sure to be using a proper N95 mask because this concrete dust is gonna short up your lungs. You're gonna be coughing up blood. And now I'm gonna use 100 grit sanding paper to hit the walls so that I can expose as much of those little pinholes that are kind of trapped between a thin layer. So I'm gonna use the air compressor again to get rid of all that dust. So for now, the bonsai is still pretty small, but I read somewhere online that the bigger the container, the more the roots are gonna grow, and therefore the bonsai is gonna grow a lot faster than usual. I'll do a 1 week time lapse and show you guys how that goes. Hey Lisa, say hi to YouTube. Hey Mosley, say hi to YouTube. Now I just want to get an idea of how dense I can place all these because I don't want to waste any of my money that I spent on these plants. So I'm gonna be blatantly honest, I hate the way that this thing looks. It looks like it has a bad hair day, so I'm gonna switch it out for a different plant. So you've made it to the end of my video, but now I want to ask you for a quick favor. See, the YouTube algorithm gets tricked into showing my video to a lot more people if a lot of people comment on it. So criticize me, praise me, or just ask a question. As long as you leave a comment, I'm gonna appreciate it a lot. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for the next video.